My name is Morgan Skyadessa. I wrote a novel called A Year in the Life of Artemis White. I am 50 years old. I live in the Finger Lakes region of New York State, just south of Rochester, with my husband and life partner of 15 years. We met in the healthcare field, but I went on to explore a variety of different career paths. When I was about 30, I was working as a lawyer in New York City. I was a corporate litigator, and I started to develop pretty serious fatigue. I figured it was just burnout, which is very common in that profession, so I wasn't that worried about it. But it got to the point where I ended up quitting my job in order to give myself the rest that I knew I needed. And during my time off, I discovered complementary medicine. I started getting regular acupuncture treatments. I was going for reflexology and tuina sessions. And within a year, I was physically restored, but I was also transformed in other ways that I did not expect. I had always been interested in natural medicine, but energy-based healing was new to me, and I became obsessed. I did go back to being a lawyer for a little while. I had to pay my bills, but there was no turning back for me. Once the door to mystery was opened, my whole world changed. Years later, the Artemis trilogy came to me when I least expected it. Mostly, it was the first book that I'm submitting now that came through initially. The ideas in that book were very familiar to me by that time. I had read a lot of Hay House authors. I had attended several Abraham workshops with Jerry and Esther Hicks. So law of attraction and manifesting and psychic phenomena, I had been reading about these ideas and experimenting with them in my own life for years. So it was easy for me to relate to Artemis's story. The Artemis story was also a very personal one for me for another reason. Like Artemis, I learned as a young adult that I have an older brother, who I didn't know about growing up. And in my case, we were both adopted at birth into different families, but we have the same biological mother and father. The details of Artemis's story are very different from my own, but I knew when the story dropped into my consciousness that part of what I'd be doing in writing this book was healing parts of myself. But I do think that there is a reason for my writing this book that extends well beyond my own personal healing. The story of Artemis is ultimately the story of human consciousness expanding and evolving into a more spiritual, humanitarian, more consciously interconnected awareness. And in this first Artemis book, we see that awakening just beginning in Artemis. That initial phase of awakening is probably the toughest. Those first glimpses into the mystery might be the hardest for some people to accept because walls need to get torn down to let them in. Old psychic structures that have enabled us to survive to get called into question. And it can be very destabilizing. It can be frightening. But when we stay with it, when we stay open, life can begin to take on a sort of magical quality and can lead us down paths we never would have imagined, but which ultimately take us exactly where we've always, on some level, wanted to go. I call my genre transformative fiction because I truly believe that when we read stories that are embedded with perennial wisdom, that show how people on this planet every day are engaging with mystical and metaphysical experiences that have been talked about and written about and worked with by human beings all over the world throughout recorded history, we invite the mind to open further. We invite the mind to expand, to allow our sense of what is possible to deepen. And perhaps the mind can be even more relaxed and receptive when such information is presented within the context of fiction, as opposed to when we're being told outright that we must accept things as facts that are actually at odds with what we've been conditioned to believe all our lives. When the Artemis story presented itself, I realized that through fiction, through the very powerful vehicle of narrative, I could contribute to the development of human consciousness, which I think is really one of the highest callings of our time.